Thank you for joining today's call of Heartbeat Tactical Insights for CIOs. I'm your host, Michael Sommer, and today our guest is Greg Kilstrom. Greg is on a mission to help brands create more value for their customers, ultimately driving greater customer lifetime value. Named one of marketing's #1 thought leaders by Thinkers 360, he specializes in connecting strategy to people, processes, and platforms, focusing on marketing technology, customer experience, and digital transformation. Greg has guided Fortune 1000 brands like Adidas, FedEx, HP, and Coca-Cola to award-winning results and successfully led 3 companies to acquisition. A Lean Six Sigma black belt and a best-selling author of more than 20 books, including Priority in Action. He also teaches at the ANA School of Marketing and serves on several advisory boards. So Greg, welcome. Thank you for joining. And if you can just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in marketing technology and AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And first, thanks so much for having me on the show here. Looking forward to talking with you. Yeah. So I started out as a designer back in the day. So I started out as a product designer, second job out of college. I worked at a startup that no one's ever heard of, original internet boom era. But at that experience, I really got to understand this intersection of technology, design, and marketing. And I ended up falling in love with the marketing part of that, but always took the design and the technology pieces with me as well. And so after that, I started a digital marketing agency and ran that for about 14 years. And we saw the advent of everything from like social media marketing to programmatic advertising and personalization. And we ended up building a lot of large websites for enterprises and some of the financial services and a few other sectors. And really through that experience, I really got fascinated with marketing and marketing technology. And I think over the years that I've been working, marketing and technology have continued to converge, and CMOs and CIOs and are continuing to work more and more closely together as opposed to being opposed to one another. So I'm really excited about the days ahead. And yeah, so that following selling the agency, I work as an independent consultant now. I also have written a few books, do a podcast of my own, but I love the hands-on work that I get to do because it keeps me informed and it helps me just ask better questions, and I ideally write more thoughtful pieces as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. What is one of the biggest lessons you've learned in your career? And this can be a positive lesson or a painful lesson that has benefited you.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, I wrote a book called Priority is Action. And one of the things that I've learned, and you probably would guess from someone that's written 20 plus books or whatever, is I try not to get in my own way of sometimes you just need to do something and learn from doing that. And that it doesn't mean that I work with some very risk averse organizations. And so they're not just going to throw stuff out there and see what happens. But there's a point of diminishing returns where sometimes you just have to take the next step and perform an action and test and measure and make sure you have a plan for the step after that. But I think getting out of your own way and just making a call, making it a safe bet by having the right guardrails in place, but just taking that action. I've always benefited when I've just done that as opposed to second guessing and triple guessing and so on and so forth.
Fantastic. So if we look at the book, Priority is Action, one of the points is success in the future does not look like success in the past. Can you give us some examples of companies that have done this well and maybe some lessons of what happens when you try to hold on to the past?
Yeah, I think any of us that have lived through the pandemic would say any plan that you made for the rest of 2020 at the beginning of that year kind of went out the window. And so this is just across the board. It's great to make a 12-month plan. And wouldn't it be nice if the world stayed the same for 12 months? But I don't even know if that would be great, but let's say that it would be great. It just doesn't work. And that was an extreme example where, almost you look at banks and they had to all of a sudden change the way moving. Some of them were already online and a lot online, but all of them had to move from in branch to completely online for several months. Restaurants had to change fundamentally the way that they took orders and handled digital and all those things. You can look at just about any sector. And I think that is the biggest use case we can have. Is we don't know what's going to come 3, 6, 12 months down the road, but what we can do is put the measurements in place to be able to tell, okay, this is working. This worked yesterday. It's not working as well as it did. I think so many organizations get stuck on this. Oh, we figured that problem out. Let's move on to something else. You don't really, that's not really the way the world works.
Could not agree more. The terms agile, digital transformation, even AI are used daily in most companies. In your opinion, what is one trend that is overlooked?
I think if it's not necessarily not talked about, but overlooked, is I truly think the idea of a feedback loop of continuous improvement is often talked about, but rarely implemented. Again, to go back to this whole mindset of, oh yeah, we fixed that, or that's working. It's the old infomercials like set it and forget it, right? It's like I know we're so busy and there's so much going on and we're so excited about the next thing, but there's such a mentality to just like let things go and not. We have such amazing data and such amazing tools to do analysis and now predictive analysis and all these things. It's such a shame when organizations don't take advantage of that to keep improving what's already working, as opposed to just let it run until it fails, and then it can be too late. So I think a feedback loop is something definitely that's overlooked.
So speaking of feedback loops, and you spoke to data, in your opinion, who's responsible for data, both the cleanliness and making sure it's reliable? Is it marketing? Is it IT? Is it business? A combination? What are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely a combination. And I think that's a new thing. Yeah, traditionally, there's this like marketing wants to do all this stuff, and it was hard for them to show a return. Even if they were great marketers and doing great work, like it was hard for them to show that return, whether it was on ad spend or just investments in general. And so there was always this kind of notion of marketing as an expense and not really a revenue generator. Sales was thought of as the revenue generators because they were last touch, and marketing was just this thing that like they did a bunch of like cool stuff, but I don't know, who knows if it really works. And we're past that now, and I think rightfully so, CMOs are getting a lot more respect within the org. And now you see CEOs that are former CMOs, and not that that never happened, but it's happening a lot more frequently. But I think to your question, it's a partnership, and it's a real partnership as opposed to two different parallel streams. Like CIOs and CMOs really need to work together. And I do think it's the role of the technology component of an organization to make sure the data is clean and constructed, the architecture's in place. But marketing needs to work hand in hand and not just lob stuff over the fence and say, oh, hot potato, like you take it and let's hope for the best. Like marketing needs to work because everybody only has the view that they have of that information. CIO needs CMO to verify and make sure, and the marketing needs to be able to rely on their data. So you just can't do that in a silo.
I couldn't agree more. And oftentimes when you're in a environment or you're fulfilling a role or responsibility, you don't see your blind spots. So what is something you are seeing or your teams are seeing from a marketing point of view that is a significant operational challenge that the CIOs are facing today that they may not even be aware of?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest challenge right now, and I work with some very large organizations with a lot of potential hurdles to getting quick access to information. I think marketers, the more that marketers rely on things like personalization and just the need for real-time or near real-time data, the more there's going to be some frustration when you send a data request. This is happening in 2024, right? It's like you send a data request and 2 weeks later you get the data back and it's
out of date.
Okay, we're already like down that path. That ship has sailed already. So I think this idea of the citizen data scientist sitting in marketing, I think CIOs really need to pay attention to that. Is that's not taking away money and budget and even headcount from a CIO and that part of the organization to give marketing quicker access to data. I think that's just it's almost underlining and underscoring the value of the data that's provided. I think that's it's still a blind spot of within the org of letting go a little bit. Just there's not these bottlenecks that are just at this point, it's feeling like they're artificial bottlenecks because we should be able to have that flow back and forth much more quickly.
When we look at digital transformation and innovation, based on your experience, how would you define success and how would you measure success?
Yeah, I think back to a previous, I think the idea that transformation would be completed is just something that should be thrown out. Like, I think if you embark on a 5-year digital transformation and you think at the end of that 5 years, you're going to be done transforming, like, first of all, that's not success. To call it done is not success. I think to show measurable improvement over time, I think should be the measure of success. I think when transformations fail and they fail at an alarming rate, I hope that's getting better, but I haven't seen statistics in the last few months. The most recent stats I've seen are not good, but I think one of the reasons why they fail is there's this expectation of, okay, we're going to do all this work for 12 months and then we'll start seeing a return. We got to start seeing some results within 3 months, maybe 6 months at the most. And let's do some small things. It may feel like we're moving slowly or we're not making big enough changes, but I think to be able to set incremental goals and to force that incremental, success to happen, I think that's what's needed.
So taking more of an MVP approach versus the traditional project funding or long-term traditional IT program where it's many months, you never actually engage with the business or seek feedback. It's almost treating it like a startup of quick iterations, quick adjustments, and based on market feedback and user feedback versus assumptions.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, it changed in the world for 12 months and everybody was just like heads down, let's just build the coolest stuff we possibly can and whatever, then that model, that like more traditional model could work because again, there's no external dependencies, there's nothing else. But because we're continually changing, like we can't even depend on our best guess of what's going to happen. Again, back to the pandemic thing, it's like our best guess of what's going to be 12 months out is a guess at best.
Absolutely. So what are some of the tactical adoption strategies that companies can use when implementing AI?
Yeah, I think educating everyone on the value of good data is just absolutely critical. And I think it starts with education. And there's a number of types. So not only on the value of data, but also the smart orgs out there are not looking at this as we're going to replace a bunch of people with AI, and they're looking at it as we're going to augment a lot of roles and have machines do what machines do best and people do what people do best. And there have already been some layoffs and there are going to be changes in the workforce, and that's almost inescapable. But I think as with any trend, any technological trend throughout, look back hundreds of years, there's always more jobs and more wealth created in the long run. In the short run, there are going to be some effects there. But I think for organizations to educate people as far as think about how AI can help you, not like just do your job for you, and educate them on, okay, we need great data to do this. So what does good data even mean? We might have a view of that, or a data team has a great understanding of what that means, but other people in the org may not. And also, I think we talk about breaking down silos and it's such a cliche, but it doesn't mean that it's not true. And I think as AI becomes more prevalent, it becomes more powerful, the more like horizontally within an organization that it can work. And I think that's just education around, okay, look over the silo right now and see what the other team is doing. Learn a little bit more about the business at large, and everybody's going to win and the data will be better too.
So going into some of the tactical recommendations, and this is where you get to be raw and throw some punches if you really feel like it. What are some things that CIOs should start?
Yeah, I think first thing would be to stop trying to just own the data. If that's the case, we've got to give and take, for lack of a better term. And it's one thing to govern the data and its usage, and in that sense, own it. But to protect it from outsiders being able to touch it, I just think that needs to stop. It's counterproductive. And I know plenty of people in that role that are not thinking that way. And I think those behaviors need to stop. I think you do need to educate teams about the value of good data and what that means, as well as the ethics and the privacy, ethical use of data and consumer data privacy. That doesn't just belong to the CIO either. And so I think, in fairness to them, they've been burdened with a lot of that governance stuff. And it's been, oh, they'll take care of it. But marketers need to take that stuff very seriously, and they have a role in that. There's some very big implications on what marketing does. And depending on the org and how much freedom that marketing has, they can go a little rogue. So I think education, that goes both ways as well. On that end, CMOs need to partner with their CIOs to be like, what can we do to help with all this data privacy? There's already plenty of regulations and there's plenty more to come. I think those are a few things at least.
Thank you. Are there any tools or systems that you're seeing that are helping to qualify and quantify success?
There's, without getting into specifics, I think the tools that I work mostly with marketers. From my perspective, it's the tools that give marketers and customer experience and other related professions direct access to be able to look at data in real time, to be able to see what's working or what's not, I think are the best tools. I think what's really exciting to me is on the AI front, like some of the generative AI tools that are now allowing somebody to literally ask a question. And you don't have to create a report and understand how to structure SQL statements and all that kind of stuff. You literally just, like you're talking to ChatGPT or a chatbot or something, just ask some questions and get some really interesting stuff. And then be able to say, okay, that was a valid query and that was really useful information. Then give it to a data team and say, hey, I asked this one-off question, but we'd really love to see this on a regular basis. Can you create something? As opposed to, I think marketing lobs a lot of things over the fence to say, hey, wouldn't it be nice to get this? And then data spends a lot of time constructing these things. And then marketing is, oh, cool. We thought that was nice, but we're moved on or whatever. So I think some of those citizen data scientist things and those chat-based query tools, they're great ways to start to just see what could be useful and end up saving a lot of time.
This has been really helpful. Are there any final points or things that you would like to add?
Yeah, I think just to underscore the idea of this better and better partnership between marketing and the CMO, CIO, and their respective teams. I'm seeing it. Some of the organizations that I'm working with, I feel really fortunate to be working with a couple right now where there is a very strong partnership there, and there's sharing the good as well as the bad, and the nice to haves as well as some of the tough pain points. And I think when that happens, everybody gets to learn, everybody gets to actually focus on what they're best at. And we stop thinking like it's this team versus that. We're all here to ideally serve the customer. And so if we can partner like that, I think great things are ahead.
Fantastic. Greg, how can our audience get in touch with you?
Yeah, so two ways. I'm really active on LinkedIn, so I'm more than happy to connect with people there. And you can go to my website. It's gregkilstrom.com and check out my podcast and my books and stuff like that.
Fantastic. And I'll be including those as part of the show notes. So Greg, thank you so much for joining today on Heartbeat, and look forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.